All right, so we heard from Kyle Allen and Thomas Davis yesterday. I thought it was interesting because, initially Rivera said, look, he was brought in here and the clear expectation is that Dwayne's going to be the starter. And I think that's a smart thing to say, but then you hear Kyle say, no, they told me, I can compete for this job. And I don't think that's necessarily unusual, but there might be a little bit of double talk going on here.
Maybe. And I think part of it, too, is for the Redskins, they don't know where Dwayne Haskins is going to be at with this offense.
Yeah.
That's the danger of this that's the problem with off seasons like this, and it's obviously unprecedented, but they don't know. And so I know that he's doing a lot of things, and not to plug, but like I talked a little bit about this on my podcast a couple of days ago, just about some of the things that Haskins is doing, and will it pay off, and when? I mean, I think it will pay off. You just don't know when. And so for them, until Haskins is in front of them, they won't know. So I think you have to leave out the possibility that, well, if he's not ready, you have a guy who knows the offense. So I do think that ultimately they would look at Allen as the backup in this situation, but I don't think you can rule anything out at this point because it's so unusual, the situation they're in.
How far behind the eight ball is Dwayne going to be since he's young? It's his second year. He didn't play a ton in college, played 1 year in college, and then he's not going to be able to throw to McLaurin and Harmon and Sims and all those guys, in the offseason. He's going to have to wait until training camp at the earliest.
Yeah, and I think the throwing with them, he's already developed some of that, so I don't view that as necessarily the biggest thing. I think the biggest thing will be getting this offense down and feeling, not just getting down, but feeling comfortable calling it in the huddle, getting out there, knowing where you're supposed to go with your progressions, et cetera. I think that's the unknown. And, like I said, I mean, I know he's been working with some people to get a lot of that stuff down, people who have some familiarity with this offense, studying film on it, that kind of stuff. So that will help, but until you get out on the practice field, you don't know, and I think so. But I do think the biggest thing will be getting it down. It's a different system here too. In the other system, in the West Coast system, it's a lot of verbiage. It's about, you could have like 16, 20 words in one play. This one is a number-based system, and so I think the West Coast typically might be considered the hardest one to get down in terms of the verbiage. All these offenses are complicated to a degree. I don't know that any one is more or less. It's just more the verbiage and how do you learn. Well, this one is more of a number-based system, and when you talk to some people, they say that this is maybe a better one to learn. But then Kyle Allen was talking about that yesterday, that he felt like it wasn't quite as easy. I could say easy. I think that's just the wrong word, but that it took him a month and a half to get it down where he felt comfortable running it in practice. So I think that's where we just don't know. But it's more so not, like I said, it's not just about throwing to the receivers as much as it getting everything down, coming out of the huddle with a clear head and knowing what you're supposed to be doing. That's the part that will be hard to know until, they get to training camp.
Where are we on the Trent Williams thing? Yeah, I was reading an article. I'm sure you saw it yesterday, where maybe one of the Vikings bloggers was throwing out that I guess that the Vikings have shown some interest reportedly, and 4 or 5 different trade scenarios potentially there. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, or where do we stand?
Yeah,
on that?
They may have gotten it from one of the articles that I wrote, so I don't know, because I did say I listed some destinations for him that made some, or that have been talked about or made some sense. I know Minnesota has expressed some interest. To what degree, I don't know.
Right.
But I think so, yes. And I think one thing that I've always been heard is that the Vikings are they're in that win now window, and I think there was a feeling that those are the kind of teams that would be more interested in a Trent Williams at this point. So they make a lot of sense. It's just a matter of, can they make it work financially? And then obviously compensation. And the compensation really has, the draft compensation has been an issue clearly throughout this. And it will, I don't know that I don't know that anything has necessarily changed with that, because they were definitely kind of far apart on the trade compensation. So yeah, Minnesota would make sense. Again, win now window. And I know, like, there's some other teams, Tampa Bay. I don't know that they're really as interested as it might seem. I think there were some things that would have to be done there. They just signed Donovan Smith to a big deal. They'd have to move him inside because cutting him and trading him is just financially doesn't make sense. Cleveland, but then you keep hearing that they feel like they can find their tackle in the draft. The Chargers make some sense because they're going to get a young quarterback, and they don't have a left tackle. So that, the Jets were mentioned at one point. I think they've kind of cooled for now, but I also think a lot of this is going to depend on what happens in, if we get to the draft and he's still here, what happens in the first round? Because if the teams don't find their tackle there, maybe they're more apt to then say, okay, now you got to go get one. And then can they work out the trade compensation? And the one thing that has been clear is that the Redskins they don't feel like they have to give them away at this point, and then they want to get second-round value, and you can accomplish that in multiple ways. Value more so than just, hey, a second-round pick or nothing. It's value.
Mm-hmm. We're joined by John Keim, covers the Redskins for ESPN.com. The Skins went bargain shopping to shore up the secondary. Ronald Darby signs a one-year, $4 million deal. Give us some intel on him. He's not a darling of the analytics community. Actually had some worse stats than Josh Norman in some of the metrics that those guys follow.
Yeah, and I know the book on him has been, obviously he's very talented, was a second-round pick, athletic, fast. So he has a lot of traits that you like. I think one of the things you'd hear out of Philadelphia was more questioning maybe some of the instincts and some of the ball skills. So I think those can be problematic if you're a cornerback. But for 1 year, $4 million, it's a pretty low risk signing. I think it's funny because with a lot of these signings, I keep repeating it's low risk, low risk. I think the risk comes if they can't play and that's who you're stuck with for 16 games. Because he does have the injury history, and that's been another issue too. So I think that's a big thing. But again, there is talent there, and it's a lot of what we've heard lately here. If this guy is healthy, then that's been a phrase here. What they're not tied to is a long-term deal, and most of these things are not long-term. So that's the book on him. And if he comes through, then they have a solid corner. I think the other thing with the secondary that they're really counting on, and I think it can be legit, is if getting a guy like Chase Young and building up a front seven that is really, really good and helps the secondary become better.
John, you mentioned Chase Young. I'm sure you saw Jason Canfora reported in the last day or two that he keeps hearing that the Redskins are kind of signaling that they are open for business with that pick there. Are you hearing some of the same things? Because it seems like prior to that talk had quieted down a bit.
No, I don't think it's ever quieted down. I just think it's a matter of when does somebody raise it. I've never heard that they're never going to trade the pick. What I've always heard is that it would take a lot to get them out of there. So I think that's kind of where it's been at. And I think the key for this would be a guy, if you trade to 5, you better have a couple guys that you really, really like. Because if it's just one guy you're trading there, you're taking a risk that guy, let's say if it is Isaiah Simmons that they love, that would make sense. He'd be probably a pretty good fit in this system. So if you love him and you think he's going to be there at 5 and you think he can make an impact for you similar to Young and you get more picks, then you would consider that, right? But what if Simmons is a guy you put next and he's not there? Mm-hmm. And so you're still getting a really good player, but you're not. Are you getting the guy that you really, really wanted? So, but that's like I said. I've never heard that we're absolutely not trading. I've never heard that. So I think it's, and again, as you get closer to the draft, you're going to hear every scenario. So I think. I just think it would take a lot to get him off that pick.
Man, I wish the draft was this weekend.
Something, right?
No kidding.
God, man, I just can't wait. We got to wait another 3 weeks.
Well, and it's funny because I'll be curious to see what they do with that. Like, do they spread it out because there's nothing else going on now? Do they spread it out more than it is? That I don't know. Could you handle 7 days of the draft?
Maybe they'll do the first.
Point, yes.
Maybe they'll do the.
We could do one round a week.
A round a day.
And one pick a day.
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
Hey, John, just refresh our recollection on what they have going on at linebacker because, Thomas Davis was added. I assume he's going to start on the inside?
Thomas Davis will be on the weak side, and then you have John Bostic and Sean Deion Hamilton would be inside. One of them, and they re-signed Bostic. I know it was between those two, and then Cole Holcomb would be on the strong side. And the way I would see this right now, then the other guy you wonder about is Reuben Foster. Where's he at in his recovery? I don't think they have a firm idea of when he would return just yet. I mean, they've always hoped by training camp, but I think it's hard again right now. It's hard to really know to put a date on it. So, but he would be in that mix if he is healthy, and because he obviously he would be a weak side linebacker as well. So Davis gives them a lot of insurance if Foster isn't available, but that's where he has played in the past.
I'm still kind of surprised, JK, on the tight end position. Rivera always had quality tight ends. Obviously, Olsen down there in Carolina, especially with a young quarterback, you need one. And they went out and hired, or assigned a couple guys, Rodgers and Thomas, but those guys aren't starters.
Right.
Sprinkle's still the number one guy on the depth chart, but you got to think that at the very least they're going to draft one, right?
I would think, and I would hope, and the problem is there are some intriguing options once you get, maybe beyond the fourth round guys who have some skills. You say, okay, I like this, and you can develop this. In the second, third rounds, there aren't a lot of guys there, and obviously right now they don't have a second round pick. So let's say third round, maybe not a lot of guys there who would be ones that there are a lot of options there.
Right.
I think beyond that, there are more of guys, again, that could be developed and are intriguing. So I think it will be difficult, not impossible, to find your guy there. But I think everybody kind of, you do kind of expect them to make another move there because they've added a lot of parts and maybe have improved their depth perhaps. Mm-hmm. But you can't sit there and say, oh, this is going to be the guy on third down that he's going to run this and he's going to be there. You don't have anybody like that at this point.